It's a project-based world. Project-based learning is great for kids and teachers right now. Addresses issues in the classroom and in schools or outside of school right now. And it also addresses the issues and the challenges of the future. It's great for later. Ever have this candy? Now and later. I want to tell you about 3 young men who came to the first school that I launched when I was running Envision Schools and Vision Education. Alan came to our school as a 9th grader. He's first generation student from Mexico. And he came to our school. Our school was called the School for Arts and Technology. And he came because he was super excited about doing video work. And he also came because of relationship, because he knew and had learned video from one of the teachers who was our technology teacher he had when he was in middle school. So it was that connection of relationship and the technology. And then we had Aaron. Aaron came to our school, completely different background from Alan. He was born and raised in Marin County. His parents were both professionals. They were both psychologists. And Aaron had gone to independent school till 8th grade. And he wanted to go to this new project-based school. So he turned down entrance to all the prestigious independent schools in Marin and San Francisco because he was so excited about learning through project-based learning. And then Caleb came in his sophomore year. And Caleb's African American, and he grew up in the housing projects in Marin County. Some folks don't know that we have folks who live in poverty in Marin County. And he had been going to the traditional comprehensive high school and was getting D's and F's and was flunking out of school. And an adult that was connected to him as a mentor found out about our school and worked to get him to come in his sophomore year. And it was mostly out of desperation to find a place for Caleb where he could make it through high school. They weren't really, Caleb nor his guardian and his mom really cared about project-based learning or technology at all. They were just hoping that Caleb could stay in school. And so each of the young men went through their experience at the school. And they together went through, together and separately in projects, probably about 12 to 16 projects from the time they were in 9th grade till the time they graduated. And each on a different journey. Alan continued to be particularly interested in the video work and was developing lots of skills. And as it came time for him to get close to graduation, I had a conversation with him and asked him what his plans were. And this was in 2006, 2007, and he said, well, you know, Bob, I'm undocumented, and I'm not sure that college is going to be able, I'm going to be able to do the college thing, so I'm going to enlist in the Army. And this is when we were in full engagement in the Iraq War. And so we really worked hard to get Alan to enroll in community college as the alternative to going into the Army at that time and to follow his passion of video. And so we were successful at that point. And he graduated from high school and went on to the College of Marin. And Caleb made a complete 180. So he went from getting D's and F's in a traditional comprehensive school to getting A's and B's in the project-based school. And he went from not being able to, wondering whether he'd ever make it into high school to being accepted into 6 different colleges. And he chose to go to the St. Mary's College, which was my alma mater. And as G was explaining, but in order to graduate from an Envision school, you have to defend your portfolio. And so Caleb had made this big, long, huge transition, overcoming long odds, both in his personal life and in academic life. And it came time for his portfolio defense, and he didn't take it seriously, and he didn't put his best work out. But he thought, the teachers like me, they'll let me slide by. And they didn't. He still to this day will tell you, it was probably one of the most important things that ever happened to him, is that he did not pass his portfolio on his first go. He had to go back, work with his advisor, and put his best work forward. And then he did, and he graduated. Aaron was amazing. He's one of those kids, when he came in, I was already the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. That he was teaching other kids. He was running the technology classes. He was teaching flash animation. He knew more about technology than any adult in the school. But it was a challenge. You can imagine somebody like Aaron, who he was a National Merit Scholar. He was a finalist. And he was in groups with kids who, if we hadn't been a full inclusion school, would have been assigned to a special day class, and everything in between. And Aaron learned through trial and error how to work in a very diverse group, and how not to be the one who did all the work. Aaron's parents were so worried the whole time through. About once a semester, or maybe more, especially in the beginning, I get a call about, well, when are you can't we have some honors classes? When are we going to have AP classes? And we said, no, we're going to have him doing college level work now, and he's going to do internships now. We're not doing the AP honor thing. We want to go deep with the learning. And the parents were so worried the whole way. Aaron wasn't that worried. They were worried. So one of the best phone calls I ever got was I was driving in my car to a meeting, and I got a call from Aaron's mom. And she said, well, I just got off the phone with his grandparents, and I wanted to call you first to let you know that Aaron was accepted early decision to Stanford. And so she says, you were right. He didn't need all those AP and honors classes in order to get to the dream school that he wanted to have. And actually, in fact, he was able to, it was actually to his advantage because it differentiated him from all the other kids. Now, Aaron is accepted to Stanford. He's rocking it. And he, too, decided that he could mail in his portfolio and defense. And he, too, probably for the first time in his life, did not pass something on the first go. And so Aaron ended up having to resubmit and redo his portfolio. And we think that's really important. And he passed the second time. But when you go to a school like Stanford, he's going to a school with a bunch of other people that have never failed either. College is hard, and almost invariably they do fail at something. And so, as Gia said, for every kid, it still works to have that place, that first time, to be in a reflective place where you can talk about the learning. And so Aaron went off to Stanford. So it was really great for them at that point in their life. And I'll let you know at the conclusion about the later. So I'd like you to do, if you're not by somebody, then you might have to move, but I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, right or left, get a shoulder partner for our talk. So we have a couple times to do this, but have a conversation with, how has the world changed since you were in school? How has the world changed since you were in school? Whether it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, How's the world changed? Talk to your partner for a minute. I think we can all agree that the world has changed dramatically from the time most of us were in school. And I would give you the proposition that the world has changed dramatically, but school has not. And so if it's a project-based world, then what do we need to do in order to make school a project-based experience? But as I said when I began, it's not only because of what's going to be later for the students, it's also for what's now. So I want to walk you through some of the ways that the world's changed. We'll see which ones line up with what you discussed with your partner. We are a highly connected world. As I look out, I see at least 3/4 of the folks here on laptops, folks with smartphones. People are tweeting right now, live, hashtag PBL World, at PBL Bob. Right now, we are live streaming this talk to the web. And possibly my mom is watching me. Students we as adults and young people are instantly connected. We are connected almost 24/7 for some of us. And that is a complete change from the way we used to be. It's an automated world. That's one of the first prototypes of the Google self-driving car. So we talk a lot about the jobs that are moving overseas. In fact, most of the positions that are lost in our country right now, and they're happening all over the world, are from automation. We don't have factory jobs because we don't need people to work in factories any longer. I just read a story today. They did an analysis of what it would take if Apple decided to move production of the iPhone to the United States instead of doing it overseas. And they said, well, that presumes that Apple would choose to have people put together the iPhone. But their assumption actually is that if Apple brought the production back to the United States, they would probably do it with robots. Robots are faster and have much better quality control than human beings. And this is going on more and more. Across the world right now, there's huge unemployment for people from 18 to 25. It's in some countries, like in Spain and Portugal, it's up to 50%. And it's not just in the United States or Western Europe, it's also in Korea and in China and other places in Asia. So this is a worldwide phenomenon that as we move, and I was just thinking so automation on the car, cabs, Uber drivers, Lyft, that might just be a moment in time. Truck drivers, they're talking about automated trucks now. The amount of things that are changing because of automation and technology is really mind-blowing. And it's really important to remember that in a project-based world, it's going to be the things that you can be good at that can't be automated, the things that are most human. It's complex. The issues that we have to deal with in this world right now are quite complex. Mickey was talking about the Hokulea. Global warming and climate change is an immensely complex challenge. That's the Hokulea coming into Tangiers Island in Virginia. And Tangier's island is losing 25 to 30 feet of their land on that island a year. Most likely, that will be the first community lost to climate change and rising sea waters. And the reasons that are happening are quite complex. Those are the issues are not going away for our current generation of students. Those issues are now, and they're going to continue to be later. And the complexity of figuring out how we deal with climate change while we also deal with poverty and inequities across the world and energy consumption and making sure that we have an economy that can still thrive while we try to deal with our man-made, human-made issues from climate change is quite a complex challenge. We wrote a book, colleagues of mine, Justin Wells and Sally Kingston, called Transforming Schools Using Project-Based Learning, Performance Assessment, and the Common Core Standards. And as part of the research for the book, we went out to our graduates and we said, so what's happening out in the world? Like, did you actually ever use project-based learning? And Rob wrote back to us and he said, well, in the post-educational world, there are never assignments, only projects. And for most people in work today, even in traditional jobs, it's almost exclusively project-based. Working in teams or individually, but often teams that you might be in the same location or you might be spread across the country or across the world. It's project-based. You work from one project and maybe you'll have simultaneously have projects working at the same time. A third of people in the economy right now in jobs are in jobs that are contracted professional jobs, the so-called gig economy. So most of the students in school right now are going to graduate into a world that is A, either project-based in nature at their workplace, or B, they're going to be contracted because they have a specialized skill, say graphic design, to work on a series of projects from project to project. Not only is that they have to be able to have the skill, you're going to have to be able to manage that project. From working with the client, to setting the goal, to revision and critique, to create an authentic public product that somebody's going to pay you for. The world has changed. It's collaborative. This is a workplace. It's an IDEO. But I could have pulled up just about any picture from a startup in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley or in Chicago or in Denver or Nashville or maybe in China. The workplace has completely changed. It is a collaborative space. I feel like I moved up from St. Thomas Aquinas from Aaron's. This is a picture right now in a school, and this was from the San Francisco Chronicle, and it was preparing students to enter into the digital age. And they're in rows still. But we know the workplace is a collaborative place, and the work environment is set up with flexible spaces. Gone are the days of walking in and seeing a mass of cubicles with executives in offices on the side. Most often now you see open spaces with collaboration spaces, maybe some workstations where you're going to work on a computer. If you go to Facebook, it might have changed, but last time I was there, Mark Zuckerberg didn't have an office. Nobody had an office. You just moved, and all the workstations were open for anyone to come on, and there were just tons of collaborative spaces. If we're going to prepare students now for later, we're really going to have to think differently about how we organize school. Unengaged. How can I possibly be a discipline problem? I'm usually asleep. I think somebody had the picture up of the student on the sleeping. I would say students, and this is, I think, is an issue as teachers we all feel, is the disengagement. We're like, what? Why aren't students more engaged? Why don't they care more? But I would say the same with adults. I mean, in general, we have a lot of folks in our communities that are disengaged from public life, from community life, and we see it most expressly in school. And our day-to-day experience of trying to engage kids while they're sitting there, memorizing things, taking notes, reading textbooks, getting ready for the next test. We have an unengaged world. But changes are coming. Because it's a project-based world. So our premise is if the world has changed dramatically, then what are the skills that students are going to need in order to be successful in that world? If you were to say right now, what's the skills that students need when they graduate from high school, K through 12, what are the key things that are going to help them deal with being unengaged in a collaborative space, in a project-based world, in a complex world, an automated world, and a connected world? So turn to your partner or get a new one. And what are the skills that students are going to need to be able to thrive in this world that has changed? Go ahead and we'll just do a shout out. If you name a skill, what do you need in order to, what skills are you going to need? Give me one. Soft skills, communication skills,
learn to
collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, time management, project management, being self-directed, lifelong, civic-minded, and have empathy, being adaptable and flexible. Yeah, they say that a good chunk, maybe a third of the jobs that students right now, like in kindergarten, are gonna, when they haven't even been created yet. They don't exist. And you think, wow, that seems odd. And then I always think, this iPhone came out in 2007. It was 9 years ago. Can you imagine what this is going to look like 9 years from now? The speaker we had at PBL World last year, the Google education evangelist, said, the kids in kindergarten now when they're 18 are going to look at these things and go, you use this for what? I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen. You have to be adaptable. I'm going to focus on 4 of the C's. And we heard them. And there's others that will, the soft skills or the mindsets or the self-directed learning, we'll come to that later. But communication skills are critical. Right now, because of the sense of what we were talking about in being connected, but written communication skills, oral communication skills, digital communication skills, public communication skills. Be able to express your ideas in a group in a clear and concise and cogent way is critical for success right now and in the future. Project-based learning in almost every aspect builds this opportunity for students to engage in authentic and real communication, both in doing real problem solving and collaboration with other students, as well as in doing public presentations. When we have students graduate from the Envision schools that Gia was talking about, and they go to college, and as she mentioned, often first-generation students are really figure that A, it was probably a mistake they got in, and B, I'm sure that everybody else is a lot smarter than me and knows a lot more about what's going on. And then it comes the time for the first public presentation. and all of their peers are squirming in their seats. They rather die than give a public speech because they haven't done it. And these are all new people. Maybe they did it in their classrooms, but this is a new deal. And the kids from Envision and other project-based schools, they're like, I got this down. I had to give a talk to justify my graduation from high school. You want me to give a talk about biology? Piece of cake. And so it flips for them. So something that they actually now feel like they actually have a leg up. So when we think about equity and project-based learning, we really think communication skills is in a really powerful way for students to have empowerment and self-agency because they have a skill that most people are deathly afraid of to do. Jerry Seinfeld used to tell a joke that he said that the two things that people fear the most are public speaking and death, in that order. And he said, I guess that people rather be the person in the coffin than the one doing the eulogy. I don't think so. Collaboration. You cannot learn how to work in a group without working in a group. There's no other way to learn to be an effective member of a team unless you work in a team. The world, as we said before, is highly collaborative. But for the most part, our schools are highly competitive. We just got through graduation season, valedictorians, salutatorians, GPAs, get as many points as you can. We had the video on getting points. How many extra credit points can you get? But in fact, what really is valued when we leave school is the ability to work in a team towards a common goal. To leverage and have synergy between talents and interest is a critical aspect of it. And most people who are not successful in their jobs, half of it is because they don't know how to work well with others. And it's a critical piece that students who do project-based learning have down even before they get to the workplace. Critical thinking, we pulled that out. Critical thinking, problem solving, working to synthesize and communicate complex ideas. Taking the complex and making it simple is not the goal. It's taking something complex and communicating it in a simple way that other people can understand it. When often students in project-based learning will do films. And people get really wild. Say, we had a project where we had kids create documentaries on World War, the sort of the transition between World War I and World War II. And the students, first of all, had to write research papers on a certain aspect of one of the countries in Europe that were a player in that time of history. So they wrote a traditional research paper, and they had teams from the same country, and they took different points of view. And they took those research papers, and they had to share their learnings once they did that with the whole team. And from there, create a 3 to 5 minute documentary that included a storyboard, a script, images, and a production. And you look at the production and you're like, that's really cool. That's a cool film those kids did sort of in the Ken Burns style. But if they look at that as the iceberg, what happened down below? And you think of the immense amount of critical thinking that you have to do and collaboration to take 4 research papers and pull it down to a story that you can tell with images and a few words in 3 to 5 minutes. That act is an amazing amount of critical thinking and synthesis and analysis and communication. PBL is the best tool I know for critical thinking. Creativity. The future belongs to the folks who can innovate, and design. Creativity is a critical aspect of being human. When I talked before about automation, robotics, and where's the hope? The hope is in the opportunities or the things that are expressly human. Creativity is one of the most human things we can do. Giving students the opportunity to have voice and choice and follow their interest and their passion within project-based learning allows them to use creativity. As we move into the future, it's a project-based world that's going to demand and be rewarded for those who can create and innovate and use art and design, not just to get, not only having facts and knowledge. We believe PBL is the one way, or one of the best ways. I'd actually say one, but maybe the only, but there's probably others. But gold standard project-based learning is the way that we can both teach the students the skills that they need for later in such a way that engages them and gets them prepared for their future now. I'm going to show you a short video clip of a project that we did that's called, it was designed by a team. You're going to hear from one of the teachers, Justin Wells, who is my co-writer on the book. It's called The Mosaic Retelling of Dante's Inferno. Juniors and seniors read the Divine Comedy and were asked to then interpret it artistically and then work in an ensemble to retell the story to an audience. And a theater about this size, but it was full, in a way that they would capture the essence of Dante's poem. And at the conclusion, they were asked to write a textual analysis of the work as well, a college-ready piece. So what I'd like you to do is look for, in this film, where you see communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity.
We just finished the Dante Inferno Mosaic Retelling Project. I had the students read the medieval poem Dante's Inferno, the first part of the Divine Comedy, and let them know about halfway through their reading of the book that I wanted them to create works of art that were inspired by some angle or scene or aspect of Dante's Inferno. They could pick whatever medium they wanted for their artwork, and once we got all the artworks completed, they had to then have the responsibility to assemble those into a theatrical production that could tell the audience the story of Dante the Pilgrim's journey through the 9 layers of hell.
My guide and I entered this road to make our way back up to the bright world. We never thought of resting as we climbed. My name is Augusto Cesar Hunt. I participated in about 15 or 16 exhibitions. As a freshman, I felt that I was ready for them, but my delivery was not what I expected. And as I grew as a student, I understood the difference between the last one and the one I'm doing tonight, or the one that I was doing that day. So I grew as a student, and it got better. My delivery got better, and then you get to a point where you just have a flow. I decided to do a whole diorama of the entire hell, having all the levels of hell. But I also felt that I should have explained the story. So I am doing a little summary. I filmed the whole journey.
But may those heavenly ladies aid my verse, who aided Amphion to walling Thebes, that my words may tell exactly what I saw.
The students are working for much more powerful reasons than the grade they're going to get in the quarter. Students like Caesar, who are putting in, over 100 hours on their project, they've gone so far and above an A after about the 10th hour. What's kicking in? What motivates those 90 more hours? And I really think it's that audience that we all want to entertain and inform and impress. I'm assigning them a writing assignment, a literary analysis reflection.
As I started to reach the end of the book, the lines depicting the lake of ice seemed to freeze my senses. The images of heads and bodies sticking partially out from the eyes were very vivid in my mind. I knew right away that I wanted to transfer this image and make it into an actual piece of art for the audience to experience.
And they can speak about themselves as artists but really get much more deep in explaining how did their artistic choices reflect their deepening understanding of Dante's message.
The experience and outcome was shared both by the artist and audience. Success seemed to bring the story to life. Although the model showed both the book and our depiction, there was room for the audience to fill with their imagination. At the end, by compiling all the pieces together, our goal was achieved. I think one of the things I learned is never give up and really follow your goals and really, do what you really like to do.
Caesar went on to graduate from North Dallas University. Works in the healthcare industry in Texas, and recently got married. So now and later, project-based learning is great for students and for teachers now, and it's great because it helps them prepare for their future later. I'm going to talk about some of the ways that project-based learning makes a difference right now in school, and as you think about your work this week, why it's worthwhile, the investment you're making now, and to continue doing it. It brings joy, the joy of learning. The joy that you get when you discover something, when work becomes inquiry-based, and the teacher doesn't have the answer that I'm trying to figure out what the right one is, but I'm actually able to explore it myself, brings great joy. One of my favorite things to do after a PBL World, or actually if there's any time at BIE, at the Buck Institute for Education, when we're feeling a little down, we just go and we read the survey comments from teachers. And there's usually at least 5 to 10 in every group of 35, maybe a few more, maybe a few less, but often we hear a statement that sounds like this: I am so excited to go back to school. I realized I've rekindled and remember why I got into teaching. I can't wait to do project-based learning. The joy that PBL brings is not just for kids. It's equally as joyful for teachers. A lot of work, yes, but joyful, most definitely. Engagement. And in a world where we see a lot of disengagement and unengagement, PBL is the ultimate engager. We see often and almost everywhere that the leading indicator in schools and in classrooms where students are doing high-quality project-based learning is attendance goes up. Discipline issues go down. And in fact, we're going to start researching and find out, because we also think that grade point averages start to rise. And those three factors of attendance and discipline and grade point average are proving out to be a really great proxy for engagement. And once we have engagement, we can really get into learning. PBL right now will lead to engagement. Mindset. We talked about soft skills, self-directed learning. I had this huge aha one time. I had the county superintendent visiting one of our schools, and we had a group of students that she was meeting with after she had got a chance to go see some of the projects and some of the work. And she asked the students, people always ask us when they go to innovative schools, well, what if you could change anything, what would it be? And this 10th grader was getting ready for a presentation of learning. And he said, I'd get rid of these presentations of learning, especially the 10th grade benchmark. I'd get rid of it. It's so much work, it's so hard, I hate it. And 11th grader says, no. He says, don't get rid of that. He said, last year I was feeling like you were, and I was working so hard. But he said, but this was the first time I had had something in school where I didn't know whether I was going to get a good grade or not. Like, I think I can, I'm not sure. So I worked harder than I had ever worked on anything in my life. And then I passed. And that was the greatest feeling I've ever had in school. And those are the feelings that project-based learning bring. That's a mindset now that student will never leave. And it didn't come from a lecture. It didn't come from a slogan that was up on the wall. It didn't come from a report card that graded character. It came from the experience of working hard on something and having success and seeing that effort does equal results. It's also similar to the experience that we talked about with Caleb and Aaron and other students who aren't successful and have to go back and revise, critique, and keep working at it because the teachers don't give up. And the students are expected to keep working until they get to that point where it's ready and they feel that success. That's a mindset that comes through that opportunity, the experience of learning, not from a direct instruction. And so if we're going to develop mindsets that are growth-oriented, that are self-directed in learning, project-based learning is the best way for students to have these experiences so they're ready to deal with this complex, connected, automated world. Passion. How often do we see passion in school? How often do students find their passions in K through 12? My son just graduated from high school 2 weeks ago. He's going to go study 3D art ceramics at the University of Oregon. When he went into high school, we had no idea at all, and either did he, that he was a talented ceramist, a potter. But there was a teacher who allowed him to have the opportunity to create. And he shared his passion with the students and my student and my son. And he came, and as Brendan said, it was interesting. It became an interest. He got good at it, and then he became passionate about it. So he was telling us yesterday that his teacher would tell him and his students, and he even told the parents about how passionate he was about ceramics when he was in high school, that on Friday he would crack the window so he could go in and work the wheel during the weekends. And my son told me, me and my buddy Matt, we did that all year long. And so when we were working on his college applications, we were looking at his GPA and we were looking at his involvement in ceramics. And we actually did a little, we graphed it out. And there's a direct correlation between his increase in his GPA and increase in his interest and passion in ceramics. And so when we give the opportunity to students to learn and get passionate about one thing and go deep, it affects all the other aspects of their life. So when we think, what's the difference that one project can make with one teacher, if you're the only teacher here and you're doing it, and you're not in the rest of the school, that one project, your passion and their passion, can be transformative. But it's also later. PBL prepares students for college. And that's often sort of counterintuitive because most colleges haven't changed. There's a lot that are, and it's starting to move that way. But we often are asked, why would we do PBL and have kids work in groups and go deep if we're preparing them for college? Because when you go to college, you sit in lectures, you have to take notes, and you do tests. That's a good question. You also have to read a lot, and you have lots of assignments that are given over large blocks of time. So Alexis came back and told the story about how he wanted to go to the big basketball game that was going to happen. And the basketball game was going to be on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, and he had a huge book to read for a test or a conversation or something in class the next day after the basketball game. So he said, I remembered what we did in project-based learning is we set a bunch of benchmarks of chunking it out about how much I needed to get done by a certain amount of time. So knowing that next week was the basketball game, I put little chunks of all the reading I had to do in order to be prepared for the class and go to the basketball game. He said, project-based learning helped me do that. So when you look at schools like Envision, Gia shared 90%, High Tech High was in here, their persistence rate is 86% in college. PBL is preparing kids for college, not in the traditional way, but it's preparing them to be adaptable and flexible and know how to work within that system. But it's most definitely preparing them for career. As we talked about before, there are no assignments in the post-educational world. It's all projects. And so often I challenge people to say, if K through 12, if we know that college isn't giving people the PBL opportunities they need in their careers, then when's it going to happen? And so it doesn't, and Aaron talked about how those skills stick. Those are sticky skills. Like you don't have summer loss on how to communicate, do critical thinking, collaborate, and be creative. 4 years later, you still have them. And they give people who have had a project-based experience in a K-12 a unique advantage when they get into careers. And citizenship. So we're not just preparing people for jobs and college, but to be global citizens, local citizens, community members. That PBL offers this opportunity for you to find your own agency and your teams. The stories that Jessica told of expeditionary learning, of kids tackling really complex, hard problems in their local communities. Those kids will never be different because they had that experience. And equity. As I mentioned earlier, the world demands those skills: critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, project management. In schools, if we're only working towards getting kids to be proficient in reading, writing, and math, because that's the focus of what's going to be on a standardized test, we will not prepare them to have the opportunities in the future. It's got to be both, and project-based learning is the way towards equity. Folks ask, we always get asked when we say, well, PBL, if the world's changing and schools haven't, but it requires a whole new set of skills and PBL's the answer, we get questions like, are my students learning enough content? What are the standards? PBL is about content, and it's a content that's deep and long-lasting, not just something that gets put on a test. This is a big shift. And when asked, often kids will say, do you want to do what's engaging and it's going to prepare you for the future, or do you want to pass the test? And the kids will say, I want to pass the test. And we're going to have to balance that. But the information that you learn through project-based learning gives you the opportunity to apply it later. We're working on a project right now studying project-based approach to PBL in the AP Government and AP Environmental Science. And the students are going to take the AP exam and the College Work Ready Assessment. And in previous studies have shown that students in the project-based approach do as well or better on the AP test, and they knock it out of the park compared to the other kids on the critical thinking and the communication skills. And third, they're more likely to want to study this in school, in college. Have we heard this from students? I hate working in groups. I have to do all the work. There's kids that are in my group, they do nothing. I don't want my grade to be based upon it. All those things are true and real. And learning how to manage groups, both from the teacher facilitating it and from kids having that experience, is critical. You learn from how to work in a group by working in groups. We always really encourage, like on the grading piece, to separate the work products so that you have work products that are assigned definitely to one student for the grading part, but for them to struggle together and be assessed on their ability to collaborate. When I told you about Aaron, who's at Stanford, working with students who he could like finish the project probably overnight. He had to figure out how to work in a diverse group. That is as good for Aaron as it is for the student who's just in there taking their time to learn the academics. How can I even manage all of this? Ken described the chaos of walking in the classroom that's project-based. It's a new paradigm to put kids in charge of their learning. It feels and sounds different. But it is it's managed chaos, and it doesn't have to be out of control. How will my students and I work together? It's a changing relationship. And we know that this changing relationship is one of the most powerful things that prepares kids to get engaged in school now and prepare them and give them the mindsets they need for later. Paul Tuff has a new book coming out called Helping Children Learn, and he makes the case using research that through relationships and teaching and learning, like project-based learning, we can dramatically change outcomes for kids by giving them the mindsets like self-directiveness, growth mindset, persistence, and grit that they need to be successful. So finally, we have to get to work, and that's why you guys are here. You've made the first step, or maybe this is many steps along the journey. I wanted to come back and tell you about Aaron and Al and Caleb. So 3 students come to a school that's project-based, all for 3 different reasons. Some have to do with project-based learning, some not at all. Al went on to go to community college. He didn't go any further. He was able to become documented, though. He went through that process himself and figured out how to do it. And now he has started his own video technology business in our local community. And the Buck Institute for Education is going to start working with him. He's a very successful video entrepreneur right here in his hometown. Aaron went on to work at graduate top 25 in his class at Stanford. He was able to do an internship at Apple. He wrote the code, was one of the team that wrote the code for Siri. And he is now doing his own startup, creating another voice-activated technology that will allow people to ask computers to do very complex algorithms with very simple statements that are spoken. I'm going to buy stock in that company. Caleb went on to St. Mary's College, and in his junior year, he left and went to community college for a semester, which is usually the kiss of death for first-generation students. They rarely come back after withdrawing from a school and going to community college, and especially to graduate on time. But Caleb did. And so in 2011, I was able to go to St. Mary's College and watch Caleb, first in his family, to graduate from college. And then he went on to get a job at the Bank of the West in Oakland. And he's now a vice president at the Bank of the West in Oakland. And this coming year, we plan to invite Caleb to join the Envision Schools board. And he's done now not only have a job, but he's giving back to his community. So 3 came. It was great for them at that point. And they're all different. Yet through success in college and career and life, they all found success. We really believe that project-based learning is the way that makes that happen. It's good now, it's good later. Let me leave you with a poem. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us. The steep climb of everything going up, up, as we all go down. In the next century, or the one beyond that, they say, our valleys, pastures, we can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you, you and your children, stay together, learn the flowers, go light. Thank you, and have a great week.